So Bryce Mitchell really stepped in it this time. Oh, Bryce. Bryce Mitchell is kind of one of those guys that everybody always thought was kind of stupid, but now has proven it beyond a shadow of a doubt. And it's really like one of those situations where you have like a little brother or a cousin or someone that you know that you like, but just says dumb stuff constantly and finally says something that's too dumb even for them. It's just, Bryce, come on, man. You can't be this dumb. But apparently he is. So on the first episode of his new podcast, episode 1 of the Arc Insanity podcast with Bryce Mitchell and Rolly Delgado. Rolly Delgado, who is a former UFC fighter himself, I guess is Bryce's coach now. Bryce went out and really proved to the world just how much of an absolute moron he is. So if you're not aware, he had some favorable things to say about the former leader of Germany during World War II. So this is basically the clip. There's a whole bunch of it on here, a whole bunch of stupid stuff from Bryce. This is the crux of it. I'm actually thinking about going back and rewatching this entire podcast because I'm sure that there's plenty of gems to be found in here, but this is the basic gist of what everybody is so up in arms about.
Hitler, hell and the Nazis. I really don't think that he was, because I honestly think that Hitler was a good guy based upon my own research, not my public education indoctrination. I really do think before Hitler got on meth, he was a guy I'd go fishing with. He fought for his country. He wanted to purify it by kicking the greedy Jews out that were destroying his country and turning them all into gays. They were gaying out the kids. They were queering out the women. They were queering out the dudes. They were, you know what her first tranny surgery ever was? Happened to be in Germany before Hitler took over. You know the books that everybody makes fun of Hitler burning? You know what the books was? Queer books. Hitler burned queer books because Hitler didn't want a bunch of queers destroying his nation. They can't produce children.
But what about...
Okay, so, I mean, where do you begin, right? It's just... So again, you know, it's like it gobsmacks you when you hear something like that. And I think that the thing with Bryce that has been apparent for quite some time when it comes to the dumb shit that he believes is just the absolute conviction that he has when he talks about it. Like, he says the dumbest stuff with the confidence of like 1,000 years knowledge just in his possession, in his mind, you know, galaxy brain confidence with absolute asinine takes. It's a couple of things that goes into why he has the views that he has and why he talks about them with such confidence. One is this conspiracy theory mindset that a lot of people seem to have nowadays, where you don't accept established narratives because it makes you feel like you have a deeper knowledge than what is being presented by whoever you're opposed to. And a lot of times that's the mainstream media. And I understand skepticism of the mainstream media because there have been times, many times, all the time, really. I mean, you know, no one wants to trust Fox News or CNN or any of the establishment outlets because they do push narratives that are so biased and they shape the news in a way that fits their political narratives. So I get that aspect of it. The issue becomes this whole idea of doing your own research. I was watching ITP MMA's take on this one, and he said something that I thought was pretty salient when it came to this. He said, you never hear anybody say that they've done their own research and then suddenly have the cure for cancer pulled out of their ass. Thought that made a lot of sense in this case. So Bryce is one of those guys that goes out and finds alternative facts, as a lot of people are nowadays, and they are the ones that form his worldview. And he soaks all that stuff up like a sponge, you know? He takes all that information in and amplifies it now with the platforms that he has as a fighter. And I think that that's how you end up where you are with Bryce. He's unchecked in his stupidity. So now it's really stupidity that has run amok. And I never really thought it was going to get to this point with Bryce. I always thought that, flat earth and psychic demons from the nether realm or whatever he believes as far as the things that the Bible needs to combat. I always thought that he would keep it within that realm to where it didn't cross over into such blatant, hateful type rhetoric. Because, I would think that a lot of people would be asking me, oh, you're a Jewish guy, thinker, St. James. What do you think about this? And I'm like, well, I mean, it's not the most hateful thing that I've heard about Jews recently. Sad as that may be to say. But really, I think that the bigger hateful portion of what he's saying is about homosexuals. And that just also is a common narrative that gets paired now, is Jews and gays are somehow connected in these people's minds because they're two groups that people don't like. So obviously them working together makes sense. It's hard for me to fully form an understanding of how these things all play out mentally when it comes to people like Bryce. But the point of what I was getting at there is that it's really more about the gays that he's upset with here. And that's just another group that has been completely vilified by people like Bryce. And that I think comes a lot from his religion. He has this shaping of religion that goes really deep on hatred of certain groups, and homosexuals get that in front and center fashion from people like Bryce. So this is kind of the end game of all of that. I never thought that it was going to get to this place, but I'm not surprised that it got to this place. And that's why, again, if you ask me what I really think of it, it's just laughter more than anything else, because it's so ridiculous to hear a person say these things that you have to laugh at it. I mean, you see the look on Rolly Delgado's face over here as he's listening to this stuff. Oh man, episode 1 of our show. What the hell did I get myself into? Well, you got yourself into the briar patch here, pal. And you're getting every thorn on the way down. So that's essentially what Bryce said. And I guess one of the things that is nice to see in the wake of something like this is that there are a good amount of people who are coming out to say how absolutely asinine this take is. So, of course, I've got Dana's response here queued up. Now, in the ITP MMA video, he says that Dana's response is shaped greatly by the fact that Ari Emanuel, who is the, CEO of TKO Holdings, or whatever, he's the boss man of TKO, so he's Dana's boss, that Ari Emanuel is a Jewish person, so that's a big reason why Dana is responding in this manner. I want to believe that this is just the rational response regardless of whether you're Jewish or not, or have a Jewish boss or no Jewish people. I mean, this should be something that transcends religion, really. Obviously, Jewish people have a very specific view of it, but I would think that any rational thinking person would have a take similar to Dana's here. So let's hear what he has to say.
Before we get started here, let me get some fucking dumb shit out of the way first here. I'm out here have fun doing Power Slap tonight, and I'm sure you guys heard what Bryce Mitchell said. If you haven't, he said some probably, I've heard a lot of dumb, ignorant shit in my day, but this one's probably the worst. When you talk about Hitler, he was responsible for the death of 6 million Jews, and he tried to completely eliminate a race of people. World War II was the deadliest war in history. 15 million military deaths, 45 million civilians, and 25 million soldiers were killed in World War II. Second of all, Hitler is one of the most disgusting and evil human beings to ever walk the face of the earth. And anyone that even tries to take an opposing position is a moron. That's the problem with the internet and social media. You provide a platform for a lot of dumb, ignorant people. We've obviously reached out to Bryce, and when we read what he said and let him know how we feel about it, I don't even, we're beyond disgusted. So for those of you that don't know what's going on, good, you're lucky. For those of you that do, that's what I have to say about it. Who's got the first question?
So before we get to the questions, because there was one that I do want to play here, and Dana's response to it, I thought that was a fairly reasonable take. I was happy to hear that from Dana. Again, regardless of Ari Emanuel or anyone else, I'm hoping that that's Dana's actual position and would have been regardless. But I wanted to address the idea that social media is to blame, at least in part, for this and the platforming of people like Bryce. Yeah, that is definitely the case, and social media is absolutely a breeding ground for a lot of these types of opinions, but I don't think that it's a bad thing. Really, I mean, social media cuts both ways, like anything else. The fact that I'm able to put my thoughts out there the same as anybody else means that anybody else can have that same luxury. And that's just the reality of it. So, yeah, Bryce is not wrong to have a platform. He's a fighter. He's a person with a lot of eyes on him. He's often an entertaining person for just how ridiculous he is. But I think that it's when you pair it with these types of ideas that it becomes somewhat concerning. And really, I don't know if it's all that concerning just when it's rhetorical, but the problem is that people go beyond the internet. People take these types of sentiments and run with them to the point that actual real-world violence happens, and that's where things get really terrible. So it's kind of one of those things that it's at the point now where there's really no changing it. We've gone too far down the social media rabbit hole. The road has been traveled to the point that we can't undo it and really alter it very much. So you're just going to have to deal with this kind of stuff. That's what I've gotten to, at least. I mean, you know, it's not pleasant to have to hear these types of things. I can laugh at them myself the same way that I laugh at any other dumb shit that I see online. It starts off small, and then it snowballs into bigger stuff. And Bryce is a prime example of exactly how that happens. You know, it starts off with a couple of small things here and there, the flat earth stuff, this and that, and then it snowballs into much more harmful rhetoric. Not saying that every person who believes one of those types of things will get to this point, but it's a lot more likely. And with people like Bryce who sponge on to these alternative versions of reality because it makes them feel like they're more in the know, that they have a deeper understanding of what the quote-unquote truth is, it's not surprising based on that. So, all right, let's hear the rest of what Dana and this question asker have to say.
Hey, Dana.
Hey.
It's obviously not a fun topic to talk about, the Bryce stuff. I think that's a great statement that you just gave. Does Bryce Mitchell face a punishment from the UFC for saying
That's what everybody wants to hear about punishments. Free speech. I don't have to love it. You don't have to love it. You know.
I agree with that, the free speech sentiment. Is there a concern, though, right, if he goes out and wins a fight and gets a mic?
Well, that's the beautiful thing about this business. For all of you that hate Bryce Mitchell, you get to see him hopefully get his ass whooped on global television. I mean, what do you want me to say about it? You know where I am with free speech. We're disgusted by it. I think he's probably one of the dumbest, literally one of the dumbest human beings. Let's not forget that this is a guy who took a drill through his nutsack, then had to reverse it and put the drill back out of his. That's the level of stupid that we're talking about here. And I could probably go on for 10 minutes talking about how dumb Bryce Mitchell is. But guess what? Bryce Mitchell has a podcast.
I believe this was episode 1.
God, what a way to start. But that's the world that we live in now. Dumb people who are really stupid and really ignorant can have a voice. We don't have to agree with it. We don't have to like it. I'm giving you mine and the UFC's position on what he had to say. And this is no different than things that I've said about Strickland, But I will say this. Out of all the dumb, ignorant shit I've heard in my life, this has to be the dumbest and most ignorant.
Last thing from me on this. When you spoke to Bryce about it and said, this is disgusting, did he have any sort of like, oh, I was just talking, or did he walk it back at all?
His thing was, I'm sorry if I put you guys in any position, and,
But not sorry for saying.
He's stupid. He's dumb. You can't fix dumb people. You know what I mean? When you have somebody that's really, really stupid, and that's who we're talking about here, what do you do? How do you talk sense to a dummy? You don't.
So there you go. And I mean, I think that Dana said it really well there. I am 100% in agreement that you do not censor this type of speech, or any speech, really. I am a free speech absolutist. I think it's the most important right that we have, is the ability to have free speech and to exercise it however you choose. So Bryce having his platform is not something that should be taken away. I think that this version of Dana now is definitely the right version to have. I'm 100% okay with that. In fact, the criticisms that I've had of the free speech first stance that the UFC has taken now really comes from the fact that they didn't always have that. There was, of course, the Manuel Torres incident from a number of years ago where Torres was cut for a time after making a joke on Twitter. That's something that you don't want to see. And it's good to see that the organization has gotten to a status and a financial state where they can be so free speech forward. So I'm good with all of that. This is the logical endpoint for people with the type of mentality that Bryce has. And I don't want to throw any of the elements that go into it under the bus, because I think that it's very easy to start pointing fingers at religion, at politics. All of those elements get very much put front and center by people who want to start looking for causes to this stuff. But I think Dana's exactly right that it's none of those things specifically. It really is just the stupidity first. And how Bryce's stupidity has manifested itself is with those things as focal points. So I thought that this was a very appropriate response to everything that Bryce had to say. So that's Dana's take here. Let's move on to a couple of other people who had opinions about this, starting off with Jan Blachowicz. Jan Blachowicz said, "Hey Bryce, since you are so good at research, I invite you to take a little educational tour. We'll start in Warsaw, which was nearly razed to the ground in 1945. You'll see many memorial plaques commemorating the public executions of civilians." I guess that's a good point too, right? Jan Blachowicz doesn't have Ari Emanuel over his shoulder. Jan Blachowicz, a man from Poland. Poland, the, I believe, second most affected group outside of Jews in World War II. So you can imagine how bad it was for Polish Jews. But yeah, I mean, Jan Blachowicz out here saying, hey, Bryce, maybe you should actually educate yourself a little bit. But it's like talking to a brick wall. That's another thing. This is one thing that I've dealt with personally a good amount. Not in this form, but this type of person. I have a good friend. This is a really good friend of mine. Love this guy. But he's got this conspiratorial mindset with a lot of the same basic foundational elements as Bryce, where it's like, I know the real truth and I really want you to know the real truth. And there's no getting through to a person like that because everything that is presented outside of what they have deemed reality is just discarded. So, and like a lot of times, I think this is probably what happened with Bryce as well, is that like a lot of people just will want to get out of the conversation. I know that's what I end up having to do. Just like, fine, dude, whatever, you know, great. Like, I don't care. Think whatever the fuck you want to think, but let's just change the subject because I'm not going to change your mind. I don't particularly think that you're going to change my mind with any of this stuff. Your sources of facts, quote unquote, do not align with what I would consider reputable. There's no common ground that we're going to reach with this. Let's just move on. That's how the conversations end up going a lot of the times for me with that. So when people like Bryce have that same type of situation with rational people, and then also have other people that they surround themselves with who reinforce the mindset, then that's where you end up getting to, is a lot of people that either turn away from it or laugh at it without challenging it, or the other side that say, yeah, you know, I agree with this stuff that you're saying. You're really based. You're really, you've got one up on the establishment. And again, I keep coming back to that element of it, this anti-establishment element, because I think that that's very prevalent nowadays in general, is people rebelling and being contrarian for the sake of it a lot of times. If you think one thing, then I'm going to automatically think another thing because I don't want to be associated with you and your thoughts. And I think that the establishment has kind of made it that way. So I understand that aspect of it. Mainstream media, major political figures, like these are the people that you should be rebelling against. It's just the way that it manifests itself is with even stupider shit. And that's the problem. So I appreciate Jan Blachowicz coming out to be like, look, dude, why don't you actually like come to these places? You know, Bryce Mitchell, it was funny to me when he was talking about the flat earth stuff, saying, oh, you know, people can't go to Antarctica for whatever. I forget why that is. There's something within the flat earth doctrine that says that Antarctica is like, I guess, the end where the ice wall is, or I don't know. I can't even begin to understand half of that bullshit. But there was something about like, you're not able to go to Antarctica. And it's like, there are research stations on Antarctica. Why don't you go to one of those if you really want to see what Antarctica's like? So I appreciate that Jan Blachowicz is basically saying the same thing. Bryce, get outside of the Arkansas bubble a little bit and actually learn about the world that you live in, as opposed to staying within your sheltered existence where this echo chamber can form around these dumbass thoughts that you have. So that's Jan Blachowicz's take. Moving on. I was very interested to hear what Natan Levy would have to say. So he has a statement here as well. Natan Levy, of course, is one of the few Israeli fighters in the UFC. Natan Levy says, "The irony is wild. The guy who has a hard-on for Floyd Mayweather and fantasizes about getting his way with him in a jail cell is accusing the Jews of queering the kids. I don't think sodomy is very Christian." Is he serious about that? What is he talking about with that? Oh, yeah, I think I did see this clip too. So hold on. This is what he's referring to with the Floyd Mayweather stuff.
Me and Floyd are in a cell, you know. Mm-hmm. He's getting fucked.
Yeah.
You know, he's getting fucked. And when I wake up, there better be some grits and eggs. He's my bitch.
Amen,
bro. You know what I'm saying?
I love that.
You know, I ain't scared of Floyd Mayweather.
Yeah.
He couldn't do shit to me. If me and him was in an elevator or in a prison cell, whatever, he's my bitch, you know? And so it made me mad to see him. That's the only person I've ever called out is Floyd Mayweather.
Yeah, I don't think that that's necessarily what Bryce meant in that statement, but I could certainly see the use of that from Natan's standpoint. I like this idea too of the Jews queering the kids. Why? I never understood that aspect of things. Like, why do these people think that the Jews, quote unquote? And I love that like it's taking one step back. I love that as well. Like this homogenous, faceless amorphous group that is the Jews. Like, as a Jewish person, I've never been contacted by the Jewish cabal, for any of my input on what we as a group are doing. Like, where is this, like, Elders of Zion type situation that they think is going on? That being said, if, like, the Jews are not this, like, hive mind, so to speak, why do they think that the Jews are queering, quote unquote, the kids? Like, where is this mentality that Jews have this vested interest in making people gay or pushing the gay agenda, as they would call it? I don't understand, like, where or why that's a thing. If you want to say that maybe there are Jewish people who are more accepting of gay people, then okay, but I think that that's just a natural progression and evolution of where we've gotten to as a society, I would hope. I think that part of the issue there gets into the whole culture war aspect of, like, the woke left element of that, where there's, like, an overstepping, they would say, with the gay people and the trans people and all that kind of stuff, where it's being pushed a little bit farther now because the internet amplifies their voices as well, but they're being amplified the same way that people like Bryce are being amplified. There might be a little bit more coverage of it on certain outlets. So if that's the case, then sure. But that goes back to the establishment element of this. So if that's what you're saying is like, oh, certain outlets cover gay topics more than others, you have alternative outlets that are covering other things more than that, or covering it negatively. We have this very much left-right brain situation in this country. And I think that that's really one of the biggest problems that we do have. One side versus the other side, no middle ground to be found. So if you're covering something from an angle that I don't like, then I'm going to find the angle that I like, and they're going to be anti-you, and we don't ever meet in the middle on anything. And of course, when it comes to an issue like homosexuality, for these people who are very much opposed to it, there really is no middle ground to be had. So I don't know. I mean, I guess that's just where it all ends up. But I do think it's funny because I've never heard any Jewish people. I mean, I was bar mitzvahed. I went to temple for many, many years. I wouldn't consider myself practicing now, but never one time in temple was homosexuality ever even discussed. Ever. Not the best that you could say with that is maybe some messaging about being loving of all people, which you'd think is a Christian foundational element, right? Isn't that one of those tenets of the teachings of Jesus Christ, is love thy neighbor and all that kind of stuff? No, they're all Satan, according to Bryce Mitchell. Sad. Anyway, let's read the rest of Natan's statement here. Crazy how a guy blessed by God with so much success and opportunity chooses to pay it forward by spreading hate and division every time he gets a mic. There you go. That's what I just said. Or is it the pressure to sound interesting and edgy on a podcast? I don't think that that's it with Bryce, because I do know that type of person as well. That's more of like the 4chan style of this sort of rhetoric, where it's edgelord content for the sake of being edgy. I know a good amount of people like that. I don't think that that's it with Bryce. I think that he really does just believe a lot of this shit. Like, he's got this warped view that is informed by a lot of warped people to begin with, so that cycle perpetuates itself. And I don't think he has any real interest in coming off as edgy or interesting. I think that he truly believes that he has a grasp on the real truth, and he wants more people to know that and see it from his perspective. He himself, I think in the intro to his podcast, he plays the clip of him from the Octagon interview where he says the only person that's going to make America great again is Jesus Christ. I think he truly does believe that. It's just surrounded with the trappings of a whole lot of horse shit. And that's unfortunate. Anyway, the next time you see me, says Natan Levy, you're welcome to have a real conversation and actually learn about Judaism, our history and culture firsthand. Think that would be helpful, perhaps. Or, if you'd rather, you can call me a greedy Jew to my face, and we'll see what's up. Appreciate that as well, I suppose. I mean, that's why I always kind of have to look to Natan Levy, because he's one of the few Jewish voices that you have that actually, is on the same level with these guys, where it's like, if you really want to get about it like that, we can see what's up. I think that Bryce needs to, take in some musical theater. You never liked the David Bowie song, Bryce? You know what I'm saying? About the Rolling Stones. About Judas Priest. You know what I mean? There's got to be some gay art that Bryce has resonated with. But again, that's part of what perpetuates this stuff as well, is that you self-segregate. So maybe he's gotten to the point where he's expunged every gay thing out of his life that could possibly have entered into his purview, to the point where he doesn't want or need any of that influence. Even the slightest drop of gay is too much, as he had said about raising his own child. And that is something to keep in mind here. The next generation is getting this exact type of rhetoric pumped into their brain directly, because Bryce Mitchell did say that he's going to be homeschooling his child to keep him away from schools that are going to turn his kid gay. Everything is out there to turn the kids gay. It's amazing. Are they bothering you that much in your day-to-day life? Do you walk out of your house and are instantly bombarded with people trying to suck your dick? Or whatever the fuck you think is going to happen? That's what I never understood about anti-gay sentiment in general, is what does it affect you? They can't have children. He said that in the podcast clip. Who gives a fuck? There are plenty of straight people reproducing, Bryce. You're one of them. You really think that the world population's going to dip to the point that gay people make a fucking difference? We have an overpopulation problem on this planet that is rampant. The amount of people alive in India alone. You know what I mean? A country like India. Just use India as an example. But India, China, I think that did they lift the one-child ban in China finally? I don't know if they have or not, but for a long time, if they have lifted it, they had a ban on having more than one child because of how much overpopulation we have on this planet. You think the minute amount of gay people on this planet are going to make a fucking difference as far as reproduction is concerned? You really are concerned about the longevity of the human race based on homosexuality? Give me a fucking break, dude. Gay people do nothing to bother you except for exist, and sometimes get on the internet and say wacky, goofy stuff. And don't get it twisted. I think that some of the shit that they be saying is fucking goofy shit. It certainly is. When you've got these people who, the pronoun people and all of the different versions of gender and all this stuff. Yes, it's all goofball shit. I will fully admit that I think that a lot of times I see this stuff and I'm like, wow, y'all are fucking real dumb. But at least it's not harmful. I would say, for the most part. You could make certain cases in certain instances where there may be some harm to certain things. And I'd be open to that being a possibility. But on the whole, live and let live. This, I think, is where it gets a little bit funnier, because two of the, I would say, more base takes about this come from two of also the dumbest people on the planet. One of them is Sean Strickland, but I have to say, I think that his take was somewhat sound. And Strickland does have occasional good takes. Strickland is very much a broken clock. He's right twice a day. So let's see what Strickland had to say here in his response to Bryce. Not defending Bryce, but For the last year, we have been watching bloody kids, dead kids, missing limbs being pulled out of rubble from Israeli bombs. We have been being force-fed that Americans are to blame for these. The truth is complex and gray. Hostage, generations of hate on both sides. We can sit here for hours arguing about cause and who is right and wrong. So, I mean, yeah, I think that that's absolutely true as far as Israel specifically is concerned. Israel is one piece of a much larger Jewish puzzle, but I do think that there is some truth there. I don't know where he's saying that we're being force-fed that Americans are to blame for the sins of Israel. And of course, the whole Israeli-Palestine situation is its own ball of wax, and one that I think does have a lot of nuance to it. And I do think that there is a great deal of fault on Israel's side when it comes to that. So, yeah, I do think that Strickland is very accurate in that aspect of it. I don't know about the Americans being to blame for it. I guess you could say with America's funding of Israel, perhaps there's something there, but that goes outside of my understanding of international politics and all of that kind of stuff. So if that's something that is a narrative that's being pushed, then perhaps, but that's not something that I've specifically heard outside of that context. Strickland continues, Bryce is a product of being on the internet too much, nothing more, nothing less. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's always just the internet, though. I mean, I think that there's probably a good amount of people that outside of the internet push these things to Bryce as well. And when you create an echo chamber for yourself, it just becomes a feedback loop. It just feeds into itself. I've been at a Trump rally thinking, wow, this feels like a Hitler speech. It is brainwashing. Find an enemy, attack the enemy, rally the people around the enemy. There is a reason why he rallied millions of people to do evil acts. Hate and fear is the easiest way to get people to march in the direction you want. Now, that is where the absolute truth comes into play here. Yeah, that's the tribalist mentality I was talking about when I was saying that we have like a left brain, right brain mentality in this country. Is that you rally with people who believe what you believe, regardless of whether it's right or wrong. It feels good to be part of the group. It feels good to have other people validating you by saying, yeah, I agree with that thing that you believe. I believe it too. You know what we should do? We should go out there and mobilize this thought process. So I think that he's absolutely 10,000% right in saying that there's a very tribalist, brainwashed mentality, and that goes beyond just Trump. You know, I don't think that it's specific to Trump supporters. I think that they're a specific type of that, but it's not specific to them. Democrats have their own version of that. What was it, like white dudes for Kamala? You know, perhaps a goofier version of it, but a version nonetheless. Bottom line, you don't fix hate with hate in America or in the world. Bryce is a product of the internet. Again, I don't think it's necessarily just the internet, but I do believe that he is correct with the first part of that sentiment. You don't fix hate with hate. And that is really the end of everything with this. I mean, that's the final point, is that people don't talk to each other. Like, we have the internet where you can connect with people from all over the world. You can communicate with people who are nothing like you, live in places that you'd never dream of being. You know, I've because of this platform here, as small as it may be, I have friends from all over the world. Friends in Norway, Denmark, England, Australia, you know, other places in the United States. It's great. It's awesome to be able to interact with people from all over the world. And you learn new and interesting perspectives the more that you interact with these people. You cut yourself off from that and choose to use the internet to isolate and only find people who amplify the negative shit that you think. I do think that there's some reasoning to Strickland's assessment there. It's unfortunate. It's a very unfortunate thing in that regard. So that's Strickland's take on everything. And another I think, pretty good take on this whole thing. Amazing as it may be. And trust me, this one shocked me to the nth degree. I was not expecting this from this person, but the other pretty decent take on this whole thing, I think, Conor fucking McGregor, who also just recently was in a little bit of hot water for some tweets and some sentiments that he put out about Khabib, a situation that he cannot let go for the life of him. Khabib either, by the way. Both of them are in the same boat with that, but that's another topic for another day. Conor getting himself into all kinds of eyebrow-raising situations with the dumb shit that he says, but in this sentiment, I do think he is not wrong. Conor says, saying a prayer for my God-fearing brother Bryce Mitchell tonight, who I know is a good man. That's another element of this whole thing that I think is good to bring up, I guess, at this time, is that I do think that Bryce is a good person at heart. Like, I was actually going to do an entire video about Bryce for this exact reason. If you go back and watch his season of The Ultimate Fighter, he was very kind and a very, like, sweet, gentle person on that show, aside from in the cage, of course. And I think that that's pretty much who he is as a person. I think that that's a big reason why he was so susceptible to the dumb shit that he believes now. Easily impressionable. Bryce is, I believe. So I would agree with Conor that, you know, Bryce is probably a person that you do need more of a prayer for than anything else, because people are talking about, oh, cancel Bryce, cut Bryce from the promotion, all this kind of stuff. No, I don't think that that's the way to handle it. I think compassion would be the better way to do it. I just think that Bryce is so far down the rabbit hole at this point that he might be too far gone even for that. But anyway, Conor continues. Let this be acknowledgement/confirmation of the rise in anti-Semitic commentary, as well as all sorts of other bullshit, phobic, racist commentary that spreads fervishly and instantly across the World Wide Web, where we, as curious beings, are brainwashed into all sorts of thinking. That is absolutely true. And I'm kind of amazed to hear it from Conor, but I appreciate hearing it nonetheless, because I wanted to believe, and this is going back maybe years now at this point, but I wanted to believe that anti-Semitism was on the decline. And for a time I thought it might have been, but I think that it's really very much, at least with the 4chan types and that sort of edgelord contingency, I think it's very trendy now to use that language. And the more that you perpetuate it, even in non-aggressing terms, like, you know, you're not using it as like a rallying cry, oh, we need to take these people down, but just throwing certain terminology out there in your regular discourse normalizes it. And I do think that it's pretty prevalent right now. You know, I mean, like, a lot of people who are not keenly aware of it would say, oh, you're hyper sensitive to it. And I would say that I'm the exact opposite. I think I'm pretty desensitized to it, because I think it's so common in the places that I have to, kind of get myself into sometimes when I'm doing research on stuff and finding different things about wherever the rabbit hole leads you, often into dark places sometimes. It's just so prevalent there that I think that I'm the opposite when it comes to that. Like, I don't take much offense to it, because I think that it is just dumb shit for the sake of dumb shit. But as I said earlier in this video, dumb shit sometimes elevates to the point of real world consequences. And that's how you get, synagogue shootings and things like that. I do think that Conor also makes a great point about us being curious beings. And that, I think, is very true of Bryce, where it's like one little Google search can start down this path that there's no coming back from. And then again, in Bryce's case, as I've said a couple of times now, I think that there's probably reinforcement from some of the people around him. That's speculation, but I gotta believe that it can't just be online. Connor continues, for what? Question mark. For one reason and one reason only, human division. We say no. All nations and their people deserve freedom. Humans under God deserve peace and freedom, and I, like Jesus did for us, would give my heart, body, and soul for it. From Palestine to Jerusalem, Israel to Ukraine, Germany to Africa, Russia to Ireland to England to America to Iran, Egypt, Sweden, freedom. Okay, starting to go a little bit off the rails here, but I do like the basic sentiment. Peace in the motherfucking world, because fuck these robots, we are human. Humans under God for the win. God says don't harm his children, so now, never, no more. Please, God, earth, let's go. We have got this. Peace. Peace from the champ. Heart. Prayer heads. Connor is a fucking lunatic, but I like the basic idea of it, you know, and honestly, let me say it like this. For as crazy as Connor is, and if you know the other tweet that I'm referring to that he recently put out, you know that he is really going off the rails lately. Perhaps there might be some more content about that coming soon. You know, some people have been asking me for it, and I might have to oblige with the crazy shit that he's been saying lately. But the whole idea of like getting this incredulous and, you know, from fucking Germany to Africa, Russia to Ireland, you know, fuck these robots, we're human, all caps typing and shit. I feel that though, because it's like you do get to a point like where it's like, fuck, man, it's overwhelming. You get overwhelmed with this nonsense to the point where you do just want to like scream it from the mountaintops. Can we all just fucking get along? You know, it gets so mind numbing after a while. I feel like that's where it ends up. Is just this like, fuck, man. I don't hate you. Why do you hate me? Why do you hate anybody? Why is there hatred, period? Why do you put so much effort into hating? Why does that become such a central tenet of your being? Hatred. Get a life, bro. There's so much more to existence than hate. And it feels, to me at least, like if I woke up every day and hatred was the first thing on my mind, that maybe at some point I'd look back on my life and think, wow, this was an entire waste. What a waste of the one life you have to use it all to hate. It's unfortunate. So, surprisingly wise words from Conor McGregor. Who'd have thunk it? Anyway, let's finish it up with a little bit of a meme roundup, because that is also one fun thing that has come out of all of this dumb shit, is that Bryce is being memed to the moon and back. I think that he's getting it worse than Kanye got it, even though they are somewhat similar. Starting off, we got this great image of Bryce and DeFure hanging out on a boat, getting their fishing going. Got the dog there. I like that the dog was included, you know? This is a very wholesome scene here. Bryce, Hitler, and Sparky there hanging out on the lake, doing some fishing. You think that Hitler would even want to fish with Bryce? You know, maybe Hitler would, like, hear the shit that Bryce says and be like, I mean, the hatred of Jews I appreciate, but the earth being flat? What are you talking about with the earth being flat? Mein man. Perhaps you are kind of stupid. This is my favorite one, I think. Bryce holding up his copy of Mein Kampf. Oh, man. Shout out to Checkmate MMA for this one. Classic. Bryce did clarify later on that, you know, he's like, no, you know, I'm not a Nazi. I don't support Nazis. It's like, well, Bryce, you kind of did. You kind of did. You can't say that Hitler was a good guy and not sort of at least tacitly be in the camp of the Nazis. Bryce superimposed on Elon Musk doing the Heil salute. That's apparently what started this whole line of discussion, by the way, was Bryce was talking about whether or not he thought that Elon was actually doing the Nazi salute. And if you think about it in that context, it's even funnier because Bryce was saying, oh, I don't think that he was doing a Nazi salute. And also, I think that Hitler was kind of a good guy. So it's like, does not compute, man. Was he doing a Nazi salute, or was it okay that he was doing a Nazi salute? Dumb shit from a dumb person. I mean, this is not necessarily a meme, but I did think it was kind of funny, and I mean, just speaks to the MMA guru's shock jockery that I've talked about in previous videos. But the guru says, just putting this out here real quick, don't be surprised if the UFC announces Bryce Mitchell versus Natan Levy during the Saudi Arabia card this weekend. Thought that was kind of funny. And he follows it up with, tough fight for Levy. Bryce has a hell of a gas tank. Hilarious, guru. Anyway, so I've been rambling about this for a little while here. As I said, I very well might go back and do a full-on rewatch of the Ark Insanity podcast, so keep an eye out for that coming up sometime in the near future. Turn on the notification bell for notifications as to when I go live. Any which way, thanks for hanging out with me to check this stuff out. Bryce, I pray for you as well, dude. I do not believe in God, but I'll pray to the universal higher power that there's some message that can get through that thick skull of yours to have you come around to just how dumb you sound to the rest of the world and, you know, get you back on the right path, brother, because I don't think that you're a bad guy. I just think that you're incredibly stupid. For yelling about mixed martial arts, this is Thinker St. James. Hit the like button, all that stuff. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter. I'll see you in the next video.
It's